This is Market to Market with Chet Randolph. This edition was produced on Friday, May 29th, and features reports on water politics on the Great Plains, on regulating the regulators, and on competition for Soviet sales.
I don't think there's any doubt about it that that market is available for larger quantities of Canadian grain if and when those quantities are available. This is a minimum quantity of 4 million tons. It is quite possible that Canada will sell more than 4 million tons in the first year, because that's a minimum. Assuming we had a big crop in the West, there's every possibility of going above 4 million tons.
Hello and welcome back to Market to Market. That announcement in Ottawa earlier this week of a 5-year grain agreement between the Soviet Union and Canada was not good news for American farmers. For even though the annual minimum tonnage that the Soviets will buy from Canada was no higher than the past 5-year average sales, formalizing those sales into an official trade agreement with an option to buy more was viewed as a strong signal that the Soviets are seriously seeking to diversify their food supply lines and may only turn to this country as a last resort. One of the many adjectives that could be used to describe that state of affairs is ironic, for it was the entry of the Soviets into U.S. markets in the early 70s that in part contributed to significant changes in American agriculture. The Soviets became the swing factor that made or broke American markets, markets that, freed from government restraints, held more potential for profits. And because of that, trading in agricultural commodities mushroomed, which led to the creation of an independent government agency to oversee the futures industry. It's an agency that has been surrounded by controversy since its inception, controversy that, as Sarah Frasher reports, continues today.
This is an application to create a new futures contract on file at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the federal agency that regulates the futures industry. The CFTC, as it's called, sets the rules by which over 80 million contracts worth trillions of dollars are traded every year in 11 exchanges around the country. Contracts for corn and wheat, and for financial instruments like treasury bills and precious metals. It is not an easy task, and in its 6-year history, the CFTC has had its share of critics. Most recently, those heard in the so-called silver panic of the winter of 1980, a panic that resulted in an interagency federal study due to be released next week, which reportedly will call for greater regulation of the industry. The issue of whether the futures industry, often called the last bastion of free enterprise, does or does not require more government oversight is not the only one that may catapult the CFTC into the headlines in the next few weeks. Just as important, it seems, is the issue of who should be appointed to serve on the commission, an issue that may soon be forced by the Senate Agriculture Committee that accepts or rejects the president's nominations for the post. It was brought to the fore last week when the committee confirmed the new chairman of the commission, who everyone agreed was eminently qualified to serve. The confirmation, though, came only after some delay, not so much because of Philip Johnson's credentials, but because of senatorial concern about who the president had indicated would be nominated for the second seat that is open. The prospective nominee is Michael Farrell, and the concern about him has more to do with what he isn't than what he is. He is not someone with hands-on experience out in the fields, someone with close ties to American agriculture. And that is what the Agriculture Committee wants, for an agency that oversees the operation of an industry where farmers' fortunes are made and lost. It is estimated that less than 10% of farmers use the futures as a tool to protect themselves from price fluctuations, a practice called hedging. The reason the figure is so low, the argument goes, is because of farmers' mistrust of an industry they don't understand. Having someone with closer ties to the land on the commission might encourage more farmers to use futures to their own advantage. But beyond such psychological benefits, it is also argued that a working knowledge of farming is essential for writing the terms of futures contracts. It is useful to know, for example, where the center of a crop-producing region is, or transportation logistics, when determining delivery points for a contract. And because of that, following their approval of Philip Johnson's nomination, 16 of the 17 senators on the Agriculture Committee sent a letter to the President, citing the law which requires a balanced commission, and stating that it was, quote, imperative that at least one member of the commission have a demonstrated expertise in agriculture. We strongly urge you, they said, to nominate a person who meets this criterion. To ignore the vital interest of agricultural producers and to deny adequate representation would violate both the spirit and the letter of the legislation. That kind of unanimity by a committee charged with approving presidential appointments will be difficult for the Reagan administration to ignore. Score 1 for the farmers. I'm Sarah Frasher.
Controversy and conflict. They're interwoven in federal policy, especially federal policy dealing with the food business. One of the areas where the controversy is most heated, perhaps because there's so much at stake, is deciding how best to manage the resources that form the base of this nation's food and fiber-producing plant. Now, last week, we reported on one such controversy over a dam slated to be constructed in central Nebraska, a dam which would provide surface water to farmers whose groundwater supplies are being rapidly depleted. Well, now that may sound like a good idea on the surface. As Renee Durazo reports this week, below that surface, the waters are anything but calm.
Beneath this farmland lies one of agriculture's most indispensable lifelines. It is called the High Plains or Ogallala Aquifer, a massive 170,000 square mile groundwater reserve that supplies irrigation water to thousands of farmers and ranchers operating in the high plains of the Midwest and Southwest. The problem is that lifeline is running dry. A fact that is placing an increasing amount of pressure on high plains states to bring more rivers under irrigation development. Rivers like the Niobrara in north-central Nebraska. Right now, state and federal water officials plan to construct a dam, reservoir, and canal system here to bring surface irrigation to 77,000 acres of farmland. It's a plan that is not without opposition. Resistance from interests who have strong reservations about the environmental, economic, and social costs involved in harnessing the flow of this river for the sake of stable irrigation supplies and for the sake of stable food production. In essence, those interests fear that water development projects like the O'Neill Unit are taking away far more than they will ever give, despite the face value power of the proponents' arguments.
There are several important reasons for building the O'Neill Unit. Information that we have indicates that groundwater levels in the area are declining, and it's expected that by the time the project comes on the line and starts delivering water, that 13 to 15,000 acres of the land that's now getting groundwater would have an inadequate supply of water and would have to have an alternative source.
The warning comes from Bill Martin, Midwest Regional Director of the federal government's Water and Power Resources Service, the agency primarily responsible for constructing and justifying the need for the O'Neill Unit. The attentive audience includes environmentalists, taxpayer activists, farmers, ranchers, and wildlife conservationists, most of whom belong to a group called the Save the Niobrara River Association, an association that believes that the greatest threat to agriculture in this area is not a declining aquifer, but the construction of the O'Neill Unit itself.
When you weigh all the factors of what's lost against what's gained, the losses far overshadow the gain.
For example, if you listen to Dick Mock, one of the association's co-founders, and Wes Sandel, its current president, the cost of the O'Neill Unit involves much more than its $331 million price tag. It also involves the livelihood of other farmers and ranchers.
No, those people never had a right to vote about it. And the people that live along the river that are losing their land that'll be inundated is a part of it, but the people that are on the proposed canal routes are also going to lose.
If the O'Neill project is built, it will consume roughly 30,000 acres of land for its dam, reservoir, and main water transport canal. 6,000 acres of that total is crop or pasture land, some of which will have to be given up by over 70 farmers and ranchers who live outside the O'Neill Irrigation District, but in the pathway of either its reservoir or canals. In the canal's pathway is exactly where West Sandal's 10,000-acre cattle operation sits. According to Sandal, the canal will not only cost him pasture, but also drive a wedge between a portion of his herd and surface drinking water supplies. A wedge that may force him to drill several more expensive water wells.
Well, where it crosses these two canyons of creeks and the main waterway, livestock depends on these creeks for water, and some of the pastures will be cut off from water. They'll have to either get wells, or if there's possible, or find a way to get cattle to the water. And you can't move cattle back and forth across the canal in the winter or summer or any other time.
Sandal's problem, while serious, is not taken by project officials as representative. Indeed, officials say it is the exception rather than the norm. For example, out of the 70 farmers and ranchers affected by the project's reservoir take area and canals, officials say that only one farmer will lose his entire operation. They also promise that all losses will be compensated.
Where the path that the canal would take, there would be some farming operations, some operations that would be interrupted or disrupted as a result of that. In those cases, we do make payment for where a piece of land is severed, and maybe you have just a small tract on that's severed from the balance of the field. We either just buy it out, or we'll pay a severance.
And for the farmer who will lose his entire operation?
Well, we would pay them fair market value for their land and their improvements, and pay them a relocation allowance.
Okay. That promise of compensation is an adequate trade-off, project officials argue, in order to ensure that the majority of farmers will have access to a plentiful and dependable supply of water. It is adequate, though, only if the water supplies will be plentiful and dependable. Some people feel they won't be.
They simply won't be able to deliver water in a timely fashion, particularly in dry, hot summers.
The skeptical view comes from Lloyd Fisher, a professor of agricultural economics at the University of Nebraska. Fisher has conducted several economic feasibility studies on the O'Neill unit, studies that the Save the Niobrara River Association has utilized to buttress its attacks against the unit. Put simply, Fisher argues that the O'Neill unit is capable of delivering only half of the water needed to irrigate 77,000 acres of farmland.
So I think we're being fairly kind to the project when we say that they won't be able to deliver more than, certainly not more than 60%, probably not half.
Well, how did you arrive at that loss figure?
Well, as I say, the loss figure is simply derived that no other project of that size is able to deliver that much water. I'm not a hydrologist. I just look at what other projects can do. And by the way, that water is being transported through 362 miles of canals, subcanals, and laterals, only 20-some miles of which are to be concrete lined. The rest of it is to be earth lined, which is the way they do it. But it's going through an area where a lot of the land is sandy. In other words, it doesn't seal very well. And it's my contention that they'll have terrible problems sealing those canals, subcanals, and laterals, and keeping them from leaking like crazy.
According to opponents, that water loss far exceeds the amount reported in federal project studies. Critics say that twice the amount of water will be lost to evaporation and seepage than your study seems to indicate. What do you say to those people?
Well, the only way I would respond to that, we've done some very extensive hydrologic studies of the area. We have good data on the yield of the water supply in the area, and so I don't think there's any validity to the allegations that we can't supply the water that we have suggested that we could.
It must be noted that Lloyd Fisher and the Save the Niobrara River Association have not run a hydrological study on the capabilities of the O'Neill unit's water delivery system. In fact, as Fisher says, his conclusions on the unit's water loss and delivery capacity are based on comparisons to other projects and on his, quote, contention that the O'Neill unit's canals will experience severe seepage problems. But as important as they are, those questions are overshadowed by another, far more serious question in the minds of Fisher and the dam's opponents. The question of whether the federal government should spend $331 million on a water project that will dramatically change the aesthetic landscape of part of this river, take 6,000 acres of cropland out of production, disrupt the operations of over 70 farmers and ranchers, all to subsidize and stabilize irrigation supplies for only 250 farmers. Farmers who have, through their own intensive irrigation practices, placed their primary source of water, the High Plains Aquifer, in jeopardy. Well, according to Lloyd Fisher, the government should not make that expenditure, not necessarily because of the small numbers of farmers that will receive the water, but because the quality of land that the O'Neill project is attempting to keep in production is not good. Land, says Fisher, that is unprofitable to farm with irrigation, regardless of how abundant water supplies may be.
Only 12% of the land they're going to deliver water is what they call Class 1. The rest of it is inferior land with hazards. Now, if they would limit irrigation to land that is, under current conditions, economic to irrigate, there would be no decline in groundwater. So what we're proposing to do is bring public water in at great cost to the public to irrigate land that has no business being irrigated.
A sobering economic view, one, though, that is not shared by project officials. Officials who have no doubts that the irrigation project they propose for this river will increase yields in the irrigation district, stabilize the agricultural economy, and ensure the area a future, all without taking away more than will eventually be given back. Whether all of that is true, though, depends. It depends on the validity of government calculations and estimates, which right now are being reviewed by a court as a result of a lawsuit brought against the service by the Save the Niobrara River Association. A lawsuit which proved to a judge's satisfaction that the service did not adequately adhere to rules and regulations covering the compilation of environmental impact studies. At the heart of that suit was the association's claim that the service did not study any feasible alternatives to constructing the O'Neill Dam, a neglect which, to opponents, is indicative of the kind of overall planning that stands behind the O'Neill unit. I'm Rene Durazo.
Now, the O'Neill project is not the first time, nor will it be the last time, that government planning is called into question. Indeed, the Reagan administration's effort to cut the federal budget has provoked numerous charges that the budget-cutting mentality has blinded officials not only to the consequences of some of their actions, but to their practicality as well. And that's just for the short term. In one of his occasional commentaries for Market to Market, former USDA Assistant Secretary Jim Webster takes a look at the problems faced by food planners down the road.
This town has been consumed by budget cutting for the past 4 months. But like the fellow said, you ain't seen nothing yet. All the noise in Congress so far has been on the budget for fiscal year 1982. That's the year that starts next October 1st. But federal officials have to plan ahead. And already they're hard at work making plans for the budget for fiscal year 1983. That's almost a year and a half away. The various agencies of the Department of Agriculture have been ordered to plan for a 20% budget reduction. That's $1 out of every $5 that they spend today. Now, every part of USDA won't be cut that much. Agriculture Secretary John Block has made it clear that he wants more for agricultural research, more for export promotion, and he'll probably try to keep some money for conservation cost sharing. But it does mean a lot of money in a department with a relatively small budget. After this year's cuts, USDA will spend something over $20 billion in fiscal 83. To cut 1/5, they need to find $4 billion. And you can't save that kind of money just by economizing. You need to cut entire programs, major surgery. And the big bucks, of course, at USDA are still in the food stamps and school lunch programs. More cuts there after this year's would raise major howls of protests. The whole Forest Service costs about $2 billion. All of the farm price support programs cost another $2 billion. And trying to cut in either of those places would be very difficult. All of the farmers' home loans this year will cost just over $3 billion. And those are loans for people who can't get bank loans. So trying to cut another $4 billion out of USDA is going to be one of the toughest jobs in this town. And here's one man in Washington who's glad he doesn't have that job. Jim Webster, reporting for Market to Market.
Well, one of the other toughest jobs in Washington or any town is trying to predict what the commodity markets will do. But we have a couple of brave souls with us, our regular market analysts, Virgil Robinson and Walt Davis. Walt, what do you think will come out of London when the Soviets and John Block get together there?
Well, we hope that they'll be able to put something together, Chet, but I'm thinking that as far as what Russia may want to buy from us this year may be a bit of a surprise. We may find out that they're not looking for what we think of as the traditional purchases. We've had the 400 million pound butter deal bounced around some, and I think that's maybe a forerunner of maybe they're going to want oil, not petroleum, but I mean soybean oil.
Yeah.
And perhaps broilers.
Yeah.
Maybe some pork for sausage. The southern provinces are low on pork, and that's a heavy sausage country, and we could see that type of thing in the Russian purchases, rather maybe instead of the wheat and the corn we might expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I know when we were in Brazil, we saw the potential for some broiler sales, and then in Finland last week, we saw that they were gearing up. In fact, we visited a farm that was actually gearing up to sell broilers to Leningrad, which isn't that far from Finland, I found out.
That's right.
So you think that there might be more of this processed rather than the corn and beans we're talking about?
The raw corn and wheat and so forth.
Do you think the market's going to react much this next week to the discussions, or is that kind of hard to say?
I think that's a little hard to say until whether the markets are going to pay much attention ahead of time.
Well, I guess what I really want to know is, do you really think the Soviets are going to commit much at this point?
I don't think too much, although they may be taking some stuff right now out of old crop corn. We have some indications there seems to be some stuff disappearing, not yet announced.
Where, you mean out through the lakes or something?
Through the lakes, through Canada. Seems to be quite a bit of stuff going to Canada, more than perhaps is the norm, and we think maybe some of that may be ultimately going to wind up in Russia.
I mean that while this market's kind of down here, they're buying enough to kind of keep. Okay. What do you think, Virgil? This market has kind of gone down, and now all of a sudden it seems to be finding a little maybe support. Do you think a lot of the markets are beginning to say maybe we've had the worst of the down?
Chet, I think so. I'm hard-pressed to find a lot of new factors that could be any more bearish than we've experienced for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So, to
now,
my mind...
You're talking about what, interest rates and the current...
Well, I think they're a combination of several factors, Chet, that are beginning to stabilize and show signs of stability, which to my mind may lead us in time to a modest short covering rally.
For example, what do you mean?
Well, I'm impressed, Chet, by a number of things. I think the open interest and the daily trading volumes that we are experiencing would indicate to me a pretty complacent and pretty listless attitude amongst most of the industry. Interest rates appear to be on the verge of something of a decline.
I see you're being a little cautious there, Virg, but then,
Chet, from what I can sense, I would be of the opinion interest rates are about to drop. The value of the dollar, to my mind, is also vulnerable at this time,
which
would create some foreign demand and perhaps some new purchasing power. The sum total of all these things, Chet, it would be my belief the markets are ripe for a corrective type rally. I'm a little friendly. At this point.
Good enough. Well, I know, again, in Germany, we found that nobody had bought ahead, whether it was the farmer or the feed mixer or the processor, and they just hadn't bought ahead because the beans are $2 higher price to them than they were 2 months ago, even though we've been going down because that Deutschmark has been going down so fast. So there's quite a little bit of demand if they ever get any inkling that maybe they better take advantage of where we are here. So you think this might be a factor in giving us a little buying in here?
Chet, I think it could be a major factor.
Oh, good enough, yeah. Do you think we've got any more down at all here, Walt?
I'm afraid we still have some, Chet. I'm not quite convinced, as Virgil seems to be, that we've topped out the interest rate thing.
Is that right?
I'm a little uncomfortable. Maybe the Fed isn't quite through yet. We may have one more twist on the thumb screws before we get through. If that's the case, and we've got another 0.5 or 1% shot to go on the prime before we do top it out, why, I think over the next 2 or 3 weeks, that coupled with maybe we'll get the rest of the corn in, and we've got some more weather and prime.
Of course, weather is always
a factor.
But
I think we can maybe work this corn off another 15, 20 cents.
Oh, I was just going to ask you. Okay, you've told us 15, 20 cents in the corn, huh?
In the corn.
Well, what about the beans and wheat?
Beans have been, of course, easier anyway, Chet, and I think maybe we don't have that much, but maybe $7.50. And
now, what about the wheat? That's starting to come in.
We're looking at $3.80 July wheat.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, that's about 30 cents down. isn't
Down
it?
30.
And yet I hear now that there are some fellows that are having to buy corn that they'd have to sell their wheat cheaper than what they have to pay to buy corn. Now, they're not going to sell wheat at that basis, so it's not going to be farmer selling, is it?
No, but by the same token, the support in corn is going to have to come from the export market, and the wheat crop over the world is coming in pretty good shape. And I don't think we're going to see China and Russia paying more for corn than they have to pay for wheat.
Well, let me ask you another thing. I had a fellow today say, well, what do you think this cattle market's going to do over the next 30 days? What do you think?
Nothing.
Is that right?
Well, we're in this mid-60s range, and we've been there for a long time, and I don't see what's going to take us out of it.
Virgil, any more optimistic?
Chet, I think a gradual move higher. I think the cattle producer has responded. Marketings have been good in that numbers and slaughters have been large. I'm impressed by that. He's current. We're ripe for
Let
correction.
me check back here with Walt. I understand that the heavy Y4s are very light now. I mean, they're very small in percentage. And we have more good cattle grades coming in, which means they're shorter fed, quite a bit lighter weight. You don't see that that's going to help us?
I get back to the same old saw, Chet, demand. Where is our demand coming from? And the housewife is avoiding the meat counter.
Would you be hedging if we got a few bucks up on the hogs and cattle?
I think that if you look forward a ways, you've got to hedge the hogs in this mid-50s, mid to upper 50s range that are being offered from August forward, yes.
Virgil, would you be hedging?
For the sake of security, Chet, perhaps a third of my hogs would be hedged at prevailing price values. I would scale higher from this level and look forward to higher prices.
Well, do you think we've got $5 up in the hogs and cattle futures here in the next couple of 3 months?
Yes, I do.
And maybe, Walt, would you be protecting yourself on feed costs if we had a little bit of a dip here?
I think you'd have to, Chet. I could be friendly to the corn and the beans later
Because
on.
we could have a lot of weather things happen in between.
Lots of things
it wouldn't
could
always be so good. Okay, thank you very much, both of you. That wraps up this edition of Market to Market then. Now, before we go, we did want to remind those of you with any comments about our program, why don't you write us here at Market to Market. That's Post Office Box 1758, Des Moines, Iowa, 50306. That address again is Market to Market, Box 1758, Des Moines, Iowa, 50306. Now, next week, we'll be back with an examination of an oversupply of rail cars. Imagine that, quite a switch from the typical shortage. And we'll look at how energy development in rural America is affecting small-town life. Until then, I'm Chet Randolph. Thanks for joining us and have a good week.
Market to Market is a production of the Iowa Public Broadcasting Network, which is solely responsible for its content, and was made possible in part by grants from the Central Educational Network and this station and other public television stations.